Happy Sunday, Miami Dolphins fans. This is Dolphins Today by Chat Sports. I am Nic Rohloff, and on today's show, we're talking about some trade rumors. Even though the Dolphins are on a bye here during Week 6, there are some rumors around this team in the trade market as the deadline approaches in less than a month on November 5th. And before we get into the latest Dolphins trade rumors, make sure you have hit that thumbs up icon. We put out daily content here at the channel, and if you want the Dolphins to win in Week 7 coming up here against the Indianapolis Colts, hit that like button. It's never too early to start the like train, so help us out, hit that like icon, and let's get to 500 likes on today's show. All right, we'll start with a little Tyreek Hill action because there was a Bleacher Report article about 5 trades that a little wild, but might possibly come to fruition, and Tyreek Hill was a player named. And I have a lot of thoughts on Hill potentially being traded. I know some fans out there want to restart and trade away Tyreek Hill. I'm not so sure that should be something Miami does. But here's what Bleacher Report had to say. As the Miami Dolphins labor through Tua Tagovailoa's absence, Tyreek Hill's name has surfaced in trade rumors. I wouldn't invest in too much attention into the storyline since Hill recently said he loves Miami, which isn't actively shopping him anyway. And that's kind of my thoughts on the matter. Like, I don't think they'd shop Tyreek Hill. Tyreek doesn't want to leave the Dolphins organization, so why would there be a trade? Now, a lot of other people might say, well, this team stinks. You might want to just go into a rebuild and trade away your top asset, which is Tyreek Hill. And I'd be honest, the deadline is 3 weeks away on November 5th. The Dolphins will play 3 games leading up until that November 6th deadline. I would kind of give it some thought and consideration if they ultimately lose 3 games in a row and their record is sitting at 2-6 because, well, at that point, the season is probably over. But you look at the schedule. The deadline is November 5th. That's the Tuesday after Week 9 against the Buffalo Bills, with a game against the Colts this upcoming week, and then home against the Cardinals in Buffalo. I think the Dolphins will go 2-1 in this stretch at bare minimum. Hopefully they beat the Colts without Tua this week. Tua returns Week 8 against the Cardinals at home and gets a win, and now you're sitting at 4-3 before this Buffalo Bills game, and if you're able to win that one, well, now you're 5-3. Even if you lose, you're 4-4 with 3 manageable games on the right side of your schedule against the Rams, Raiders, and Patriots, where you can easily go 3-0 in that stretch with Tua Tagovailoa. So I don't know if it's the smartest thing to deal off Tyreek Hill, especially with how easy the schedule is, but if you do lose 3 in a row, maybe you do end up dealing Hill away. And he is still one of the most dynamic players in all football. We know what he has done in his 2 years in Miami in 2022, 2023. Off to a little bit of a slower start this season, but no QB1. The passing game hasn't been where it's been in the past couple of seasons. Obviously, with no Tua, we've been dealing with Tyler Huntley, Skylar Thompson, Tim Boyle. Like, there's a lot to go on here, but Hill is so dang good. I don't know if I'd be willing to trade him unless someone came really with a really good offer. But you let me know, would you consider trading Tyreek Hill? I think I would maybe even give it a 15% thought, if you will, if they lose 3 in a row and their record's sitting at 2-6. I don't see that being a scenario for Miami. I don't think they're that bad to where they're going to lose 3 games in a row to the Colts, Cardinals, and Bills, especially since the Bills are struggling. But let me know your thoughts down in the comments section. But you still can get a first-round pick for Tyreek Hill. There's no debating that. The guy is still crazy talented. And if you did want to restart and rebuild this franchise, if you will, maybe trading him would be a good start because you'd get extra ammunition in the future to use on draft capital or maybe in a different trade of that matter. And if you're thinking about teams to watch for a Tyreek Hill trade, these are the 3 that initially come to mind for me. The Chiefs could want him back, especially with injuries to Rashee Rice, and you've had them having to rely on Juju Smith-Schuster, rookie Xavier Worthy. Could they want Tyreek Hill back? Now, I don't know if I'd be willing to do that, but then the Steelers or Commanders are 2 teams that desperately need a quarterback, and if they can, or wide receiver, and they've continued to stack wins here, maybe they go all in and offer a first-round pick to get Tyreek Hill from Miami. Now, the thing is, it is very obvious, and we've said this earlier in the show, and Bleacher Report mentioned as well, Tyreek Hill wants to stay with the Dolphins. So if he wants to be here, I'm not pushing him out. Like I said, I give it a 10%, 15% chance. And I'm sure the Dolphins would get calls on Tyreek if they end up losing 3 in a row before the deadline or sitting at 2-6. I just don't see this thing happening, and I don't think Chris Grier is going to look to trade Tyreek Hill, especially after giving a little contract restructure over the offseason. All right, we're going to get to some other names here like Azeez Ojulari and Emmanuel Ogbah, but make sure you get started with Game Time, the #1 ticketing app on the market, and they have a great deal for the Dolphins fans where you can get $20 off your first purchase. Game Time tickets allow you to get the best price guaranteed, and they specialize in last-minute tickets as well. And with a new feature called Game Time Picks, which filters out the fluff to show you only great seats on a credible value without having to go through 1,000 tickets and waste your time. You can get your seat view in the app before you buy, get a panoramic view, and you can also get all-in pricing, which shows you the total price of your ticket up front rather than getting blindsided at checkout with some fees. Well, I'm going to Mets-Dodgers NLCS Game 4 next Thursday. Big Mets fan here, and I got my tickets with Game Time. I'm fired up to go. Game Time's the only way I purchase my tickets, and like I said, they're offering $20 off to the real ones here at Dolphins Today. When you download the app, create an account, and use code CHATSPORTS, CHATSPORTS, you can get $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply, but once again, create an account and use code CHATSPORTS to get $20 off. What time is it? It's Game Time. Appreciate Game Time for sponsoring today's show. That link will be in the description and comments of today's show. All right, let's move over to someone the Dolphins could buy now, and maybe that's Azeez Ojulari, the edge rusher for the New York Giants, because Bleacher Report named him as someone who could be dealt at the trade deadline coming up here in just about a month. Bleacher Report has this to say: pass rusher Azeez Ojulari remains a sensible trade chip. The fourth-year pro continues to be a defensive afterthought in depth behind Kayvon Thibodeaux and Brian Burns. Now, Thibodeaux did just go on IR, so maybe this changes things, but Ojulari has just played about 37% of the defensive snaps this season. In a larger role, however, he might thrive. And when you think about what the Dolphins need on their roster, offensive line takes priority, but edge is really coming up there because right now your top two edges are Emmanuel Ogbah and rookie Chop Robinson. And Chop has made some plays on film, but he hasn't really made an impact in the stat sheet. And with Bradley Chubb still on the PUP list, Jaelan Phillips out for the year, you're relying on Tyus Bowser, Quentin Bell. Mo Kamara hasn't been active for any game this season. To me, if the Dolphins are going to make a move at the deadline and add someone to this roster rather than trading someone away, I think edge rusher and interior offensive line would be those two moves. Now, I know Bradley Chubb is slated to return, but there's no guarantee he returns and looks like the Bradley Chubb that we know and love. He's coming off of a torn ACL at the end of last season against the Baltimore Ravens. So adding an experienced edge rusher to add to this room, and you know if the Dolphins want to make the postseason, make the playoffs, and make some noise, they're going to have to generate pressure on the quarterback, which they have not done this season. They are bottom half in the NFL in every single statistic in terms of getting after the quarterback outside of a pass rush grade from PFF. But they haven't got the sacks. They haven't got the pressures. They blitz about half the time. They're 15th in the NFL in blitz percentage. And if Anthony Weaver doesn't want to dial up more blitzes, I think Azeez Ojulari could be an interesting option to add to this roster to help be that cemented second or third guy once Bradley Chubb ultimately returns. Make sure you are subscribed to the channel because if the Dolphins do make a move, we will make a video whether they trade someone, where they don't make a move, where they even trade for someone. We'll have you covered with everything surrounding this team. We're also live for every single Dolphins game. Join the channel, hit that sub button because it's going to be an interesting final little 12 games of the season. All right, let's shift back over to Ojulari because he is someone that has been productive in the past. He has not been on the field often this year after the acquisition of Brian Burns in New York, but you see the numbers over the last 3 seasons before that. 8 sacks, 5.5, decreased role in 2023, but he was really impactful in 22 and 21, and he was on a really solid pace for the Giants in 2022 before he got hurt and only ended up playing in 7 games. Like, this is someone who has had decent experience in the past of getting after the quarterback and generating sacks, and I don't think he would be an expensive option just because of the Kayvon Thibodeaux and the Brian Burns. Like, we know Ojulari's their third guy, and he would be able to probably be acquired for a 4th, 5th, trade pick, Jesus, my goodness, in this upcoming deadline. And if that's the case, I could be in, especially if the Dolphins stack a couple of wins. Now, I hate to continue to just say it's all dependent on how the team does over the next 3 weeks, but with the deadline coming up here in just a second, like, I don't know. It probably makes sense for you to wait a little bit and see what happens with this ball club before you ultimately make a choice on whether you're going to buy or sell. Speaking, if you do go sell, could you trade Emmanuel Ogbah? We'll go from one edge rusher to another here because Pro Football Focus mentioned Ogbah as a trade candidate if Miami ultimately decides to move away pieces at the deadline. Obviously only signed a one-year deal after Shaq Barrett retired and signed right before training camp began in August. And he's had a pretty solid start to the season for Miami in a role that many of us didn't expect him have to play. He's had a couple sacks. He has a PFF grade of 63.4. He has been arguably one of the most pleasant surprises on this football team because no one thought he was even going to be on the roster. Then he gets signed, expects to be the third or fourth edge rusher, and then all of a sudden he's thrusted now into the number one role, and he's actually generated a couple big plays. He's had a couple sacks. He's had an interception. He picked off Will Levis on that Monday Night Football game. He has been someone who has been really good for Miami thus far. And even if the Dolphins want to sell, I don't know if depleting the edge department is smart. Like, even if you struggle here down the stretch, you still don't want to put out the worst football team imaginable, and trading away Emmanuel Ogbah would really make your edge room really depleted. And I don't think that is a smart move for the Dolphins. So even if Ogbah and this team is not in the spot we want them to be on November 5th in a couple of weeks, I still think holding on to him is a good decision because he also can help mentor Chop Robinson and Mo Kamara as we continue to get through the season. I think keeping Emmanuel Ogbah is a smart move by the Dolphins. Make the call for me. Will the Dolphins buy or sell at the NFL trade deadline in 3 weeks? Largely dependent on how they do against the Colts, Cardinals, and Bills, but assuming they go 2-1 and heck even 1-2, I don't really see selling like that much is on the table. And that's why I think they'll end up buying. Like, I'm optimistic about this team. You can call me crazy. Maybe you do think I'm nuts. But I think 2-1 over the next 3 weeks is very manageable against the Cardinals and Colts, especially when you think Tua is going to be back in that game against the Cardinals. And if they go 2-1 and after 8 games, they'll be 4-4 with 3 games against the Rams, Raiders, and Patriots, which easily could be 3-0. And then guess what? If you are 4-4, you rattle off 3 wins there, you're 7-4, and you're sitting really pretty going into the final 6 games of the season. I think this team has a run in them. Maybe I'm a little nuts, but I do think they have a chance to really make a move this season, and maybe they ultimately buy at the deadline, whether it be an interior offensive lineman or be an edge rusher to really bolster this roster and help this team make a turnaround and make the postseason. All right, that's going to do it for today's show. Like I said, make sure you are subscribed to the channel because we're dropping daily content as well as live for every game. We're under 300 subscribers away from 62K, so hit that sub button and let's get there ASAP.